Sarah first noticed the video had been uploaded at 3:47 a.m. on Memorial Day morning. She wasn't supposed to be awake, but insomnia had become her closest companion since the divorce. The notification pinged on her phone, "New video uploaded to your YouTube channel." She stared at the screen, confusion cutting through her exhaustion. She hadn't uploaded anything in months. Her channel, Sarah's Simple Life, had been dormant since she'd moved into the cramped downtown apartment, trading her suburban house for a fresh start that felt more like starting over at zero. The video was titled, "Memorial Day Special You Don't Know Me at All." Her finger hovered over the thumbnail. It showed her bedroom, her current bedroom, not the old one. The angle was from the corner near the ceiling, looking down at her bed. In the frame, she could see herself sleeping, face peaceful, completely unaware. Sarah's hands began to shake. She had never filmed herself sleeping. She didn't even own a camera that could shoot from that angle. She clicked play. The video opened with that same shot of her sleeping, but the audio wasn't silence. It was her voice, speaking clearly and calmly, though her lips on screen never moved. "Memorial Day is when we remember the dead," her recorded voice said. "But what about the living who wish they were dead? What about the people who are already ghosts, walking around pretending they matter?" Sarah jabbed the pause button. That was definitely her voice, but she had never spoken those words. She would never speak those words. She scrolled to the comments section. 43 comments in less than 4 hours. Asterisk. "Holy shit, Sarah, are you okay?" Asterisk. Asterisk. "This is so dark. Please call someone." Asterisk. Asterisk. "I'm worried about you. This doesn't sound like you at all." Asterisk. Asterisk. "Sarah, my mom says you used to babysit me. Please get help." Asterisk. The worst part was the comments from people she recognized. Her ex-husband Mike had written, asterisk, "Sarah, what the hell is this? You're scaring Emma." Asterisk Emma? Their 8-year-old daughter, who was supposed to spend the holiday weekend with Mike's parents. Sarah called Mike immediately. "What kind of sick joke is this?" His voice cut through the phone like a blade. "Mike, I didn't make that video. I was asleep. Someone else. Don't lie to me. It's your channel, your voice, your bedroom. Emma saw it before I could stop her. She's asking why Mommy wants to die." The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone, then back at the video. She tried to delete it, but every time she clicked the delete button, the page refreshed and the video remained. She tried logging out and back in. She changed her password. Nothing worked. She called YouTube's support line and spent 2 hours on hold before reaching a confused representative who insisted the video had been uploaded using her verified account credentials from her registered IP address. "The metadata shows it was filmed and uploaded from your device, ma'am. There's no indication of a security breach. That's impossible. I was asleep. Have you been sleepwalking lately? Sleep disorders can cause people to do complex tasks without remembering." Sarah hung up. By noon, the video had been shared across her small town's Facebook groups. Old high school classmates were reaching out with concern and curiosity. Her sister called 3 times. Her mother drove over unannounced, finding Sarah curled on her couch, staring at her laptop screen. "Honey, people are worried. Mrs. Patterson from church says you posted something disturbing." "I didn't post anything, Mom. But it's your voice. It's your room." Sarah looked at her mother's face, seeing doubt creeping in around the edges of concern. Even her own mother wasn't sure. That evening, Sarah noticed something else. A second video had been uploaded at 6:23 p.m. while she was in the shower. This one was titled, "Memorial Day Special Part 2 The Things I've Done." The thumbnail showed the inside of her old house, the one she'd shared with Mike. Specifically, it showed Emma's bedroom. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She clicked play with trembling fingers. Again, it was her voice, clear and measured, speaking over footage that moved through her old house like a guided tour. "People think they know what happened to my marriage," her voice narrated as the camera panned across Emma's empty bed, her abandoned toys, the family photos still hanging on the walls. They think it was about money, or growing apart, or irreconcilable differences. But that's not the truth. The camera moved to the master bedroom, focusing on Mike's side of the bed. The truth is what I put in his coffee every morning for 3 months. Just a little bit. Not enough to kill him, but enough to make him sick. To make him weak. To make him doubt himself. Sarah screamed at her laptop screen. She had never done that. She would never hurt Mike, never hurt anyone. And Emma. Her voice continued as the camera returned to the child's room. Sweet Emma. She doesn't know that Mommy used to stand by her bed at night, watching her sleep, thinking how easy it would be to just stop this. To make it all stop. Sarah slammed the laptop shut, but she could still hear her voice continuing faintly from the speakers. She grabbed her keys and drove to Mike's house, running red lights and stop signs. She had to explain, had to make him understand this wasn't her. But when she pulled into the driveway, police cars were already there. Detective Morrison, whom she'd known since high school, met her at the front door. Sarah, we need to talk. It's not me, she said immediately. Someone is doing this to me. Someone is using my voice, my channel. We've had the videos analyzed by our tech unit, Morrison said gently. The voice analysis confirms it's you speaking. The IP address traces back to your apartment. And Sarah. He paused, his expression growing more serious. We found something else. He led her to his patrol car and opened a laptop on the hood. We found your search history from last month. The screen showed browser records from her computer. How to make someone sick without killing them, undetectable ways to poison food, signs of slow poisoning, how to make death look natural. Sarah, when did you search for these things? She stared at the screen, her reflection ghost-like in the monitor. I didn't. I never searched for any of that. But even as she said it, a memory flickered. A strange dream she'd had weeks ago, about sitting at her computer in the middle of the night, typing things she couldn't remember. She'd dismissed it because she'd been sleepwalking more since the divorce, waking up in different rooms, once even finding herself standing in her kitchen at 4 a.m. with no memory of getting there. The sleepwalking, she whispered. Morrison nodded. Your ex-husband mentioned you've been having episodes. Sarah, I need to ask you directly, have you been planning to hurt Mike or Emma? No. Never. I love Emma. I would die before I'd hurt her. But as she spoke, another memory surfaced. Standing in Emma's doorway during one of her visits, watching her daughter sleep, feeling overwhelmed by a darkness she couldn't name. Had she been thinking about ending things? Had she been standing there longer than she remembered? This is just the beginning of the nightmare. What Sarah discovers next about her own mind will shatter everything she thought she knew about herself. That night, back in her apartment, Sarah set up her phone to record herself sleeping. If someone was coming into her home, if someone was using her to create these videos, she would catch them. She woke up at 3:47 a.m. to her phone notification sound. A third video had been uploaded. But when she checked her phone's recording, it showed her sleeping peacefully through the night. No one had entered her room. No one had touched her computer. Yet the video was there. Memorial Day Special Part 3, what I'm going to do next. This time, the footage was from inside Mike's house. Recent footage. The camera moved through rooms she recognized, past Emma's current drawings on the refrigerator, lingering on family photos that had been taken after the divorce. Her voice spoke over the imagery. I know where they keep the spare key. I know Mike's schedule. I know Emma's routine. And I know that by tomorrow night they'll understand that some problems can only be solved permanently. Sarah ran to her laptop and checked the metadata. The video had been uploaded from her IP address while she slept. The voice analysis would undoubtedly confirm it was her speaking. But she was asleep. She had proof she was asleep. Unless. She opened her laptop's browser history. New searches had been made at 3:45 a.m. Mike Henderson work schedule, Emma Henderson school pickup time, best time to break into a house undetected. Sarah stared at the searches, at the timestamps that coincided perfectly with her sleep recording. She had been asleep. She could prove she had been asleep. So who was using her computer? Who was making these searches? She called Dr. Patterson, the sleep specialist Mike had insisted she see months ago. Doctor, is it possible to sleepwalk and use a computer? To do complex tasks while asleep? Absolutely. Sleep disorders can cause people to perform remarkably sophisticated activities while unconscious. Sleepwalking, or somnambulism, can include everything from driving cars to having conversations to, yes, using computers. The individual typically has no memory of these activities. But could someone plan things while sleepwalking? Could they make detailed plans to hurt someone? A long pause. Sarah, that's concerning. Complex planning during sleep episodes can indicate serious underlying psychological issues. Are you having thoughts about harming others? Sarah ended the call. She looked at her reflection in her laptop screen and saw a stranger. How many nights had she been walking around, planning, searching, uploading? How many thoughts had been buried in her subconscious, only emerging when her conscious mind was asleep? The worst realization hit her like a physical blow. If she was doing these things while asleep, if she was planning to hurt Mike and Emma while unconscious, then the person she was awake, the person who loved her daughter and would never hurt anyone, wasn't the real Sarah. The real Sarah was the one who came out at night. The one who remembered what Mike had done to deserve slow poisoning. The one who stood in Emma's room with thoughts too dark to surface during daylight. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your car trunk. Sarah's hand shook as she read the message. She hadn't sent herself a text. Had she? She walked to her car in the apartment complex parking lot, keys jingling in her trembling fingers. The trunk opened with a soft click. Inside was a duffel bag she'd never seen before, filled with items she didn't remember buying: rope, duct tape, a knife, chloroform, and a handwritten note in her own handwriting that read, *tomorrow night. Make it look like a break-in gone wrong. Emma won't suffer, *. Sarah stared at the bag, at her own handwriting, at the meticulous planning her sleeping mind had conducted. She slammed the trunk shut and ran back to her apartment, grabbing her phone to call the police. But as she dialed, she stopped. What would she tell them? That she'd been planning to murder her ex-husband and daughter while sleepwalking? That she'd somehow purchased weapons and made detailed plans while unconscious? They would arrest her. They would lock her up. And Emma. Emma would grow up knowing her mother had planned to kill her. Sarah sat in her apartment, staring at her phone, paralyzed by the realization that the most dangerous person in Emma's life was her. At 3:47 a.m., she woke up again. Her laptop was open. A fourth video had been uploaded. But this time, she remembered making it. The first time Jake noticed his neighbor filming him was during the Memorial Day barbecue. He was flipping burgers on his back deck when he caught the glint of sunlight reflecting off a camera lens in the upstairs window of the house next door. At first, he assumed it was nothing. Maybe Tom was taking pictures of his own yard, or documenting some home improvement project. But the lens was pointed directly at Jake's patio. At Jake's family. At his 7-year-old daughter Mia, who was running around in her swimsuit, squealing with laughter as she chased their golden retriever through the sprinkler. Jake waved at the window. The camera disappeared immediately. Tom Brennan had moved in 6 months ago, a quiet guy in his 40s who worked from home doing something with computers. He seemed harmless enough, always polite when they crossed paths getting mail, always quick to help when Jake's garbage can tipped over in the wind. But Jake had never seen Tom's wife or kids, never heard voices through the thin walls between their townhouses. Just Tom, living alone, keeping to himself. That evening, Jake mentioned the camera to his wife Lisa while they were cleaning up the barbecue dishes. Maybe he's just documenting the neighborhood, Lisa suggested, scraping leftover potato salad into the trash. You know how some people are about property values and stuff. Jake nodded, but something gnawed at him. The way the camera had been positioned, the way it had snapped away the moment he'd acknowledged it, it felt deliberate. Secretive. Over the next few days, Jake found himself paying closer attention to Tom's house. The man kept out hours, with lights on at all times of night. Sometimes Jake would hear strange sounds through the walls, not loud enough to complain about, but noticeable. Rhythmic tapping, like someone typing constantly. The occasional creak of floorboards directly above where Mia's bedroom was located on their side of the shared wall. On Thursday, Jake was mowing his front lawn when he noticed Tom's garbage can. It was overstuffed, with papers spilling out onto the sidewalk. Being neighborly, Jake walked over to stuff the loose papers back inside. That's when he saw them. Dozens of printed photographs. All of his family. Pictures of Lisa gardening. Pictures of Mia playing in their backyard. Pictures taken through their kitchen window while they were eating dinner. Pictures of Jake himself, sleeping, taken through their bedroom window from an angle that suggested Tom had climbed onto something to get the shot. Jake's hands shook as he rifled through the images. Some were time-stamped going back months, long before the Memorial Day barbecue. Tom had been watching them, photographing them, since almost the day he'd moved in. At the bottom of the pile was something worse. Printed emails, addressed to various photography websites and forums. The subject lines made Jake's stomach lurch. Family next door, full collection available. Exclusive neighborhood content, discreet buyers only. Special request fulfilled, more available. Jake stuffed the papers back into the garbage can and walked quickly back to his house, his mind racing. Tom wasn't just taking pictures for his own twisted pleasure. He was selling them. To strangers on the internet, who had specifically requested photos of Jake's family. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about all the times Mia had played in their backyard, all the times Lisa had gardened in her summer clothes, all the moments they'd assumed were private. Tom had been watching everything, cataloging everything, turning their most intimate family moments into commodities. At 2 a.m., Jake heard the typing sounds again. Constant, rhythmic clicking from Tom's side of the wall. Right above Mia's room. Jake crept downstairs and stepped outside to look at Tom's house. Every window was lit up, and through the upstairs window, the same one where he'd seen the camera, Jake could see Tom sitting at a computer. Multiple monitors glowed in the darkness, and even from his yard, Jake could make out what looked like a grid of video feeds on the screens. Live video feeds. Of houses. Of bedrooms. Of families who had no idea they were being watched. Jake pulled out his phone and called the police. "We need to see evidence of a crime in progress," the dispatcher explained after Jake had told his story. "Photographs taken from public areas aren't necessarily illegal, and if he's on his own property. He's selling pictures of my 7-year-old daughter to strangers on the internet. Sir, do you have proof of that? Have you seen money changing hands? Do you have copies of these alleged emails?" Jake realized he'd made a mistake throwing the papers back. He had no proof now except his word. "I can send an officer by in the morning to talk to both of you," the dispatcher offered. "Maybe there's been a misunderstanding." Jake hung up, frustrated. By morning, Tom would have disposed of any evidence. He'd be more careful, more discreet. And Jake's family would still be living next door to someone who was violating them in ways they couldn't even imagine. Jake spent the rest of the night researching Tom Brennan online. What he found made his blood run cold. Tom had lived in 4 different cities over the past 8 years. In each location, he'd rented houses in family-friendly neighborhoods, staying for 6 to 12 months before moving on. And in each city, there had been reports. Neighbors complaining about privacy violations. Parents discovering their children had been photographed without permission. But Tom had always moved away before any charges could be filed, always staying just barely within the legal boundaries of what constituted stalking or harassment. Jake was staring at a forum post from Tom's previous neighborhood when he heard Mia scream. He ran upstairs to find her standing in her bedroom, pointing at the window. "Daddy, there's a man outside taking pictures of me." Jake looked out Mia's window and saw Tom in his own yard, camera in hand, lens pointed directly at their house. When Tom saw Jake, he didn't run or hide the camera. He just stood there, staring back, and slowly lowered the camera with what looked like a smile. It was a challenge. Tom knew Jake had discovered him, and he didn't care. He was daring Jake to do something about it. This is just the beginning of the nightmare. What Jake discovers next about his neighbor's true intentions will reveal a web of surveillance and exploitation that reaches far beyond his own family. The next morning, Jake took the day off work and decided to follow Tom. If the police needed evidence of criminal activity, Jake would get it himself. Tom left his house at 10 a.m., driving a nondescript sedan to what looked like a storage facility across town. Jake parked at a distance and watched through binoculars as Tom opened a unit filled with equipment: professional cameras, long-range lenses, computer servers, and boxes upon boxes of what looked like printed photographs. But Tom wasn't alone. 3 other men were there, examining the equipment, sorting through photographs, discussing something Jake couldn't hear. Money changed hands? Lots of it. Jake took pictures with his phone, but from his distance, the faces weren't clear enough to identify anyone except Tom. Then Jake saw something that made his hands freeze on the binoculars. One of the men was holding up a photograph that Jake recognized. It was Mia's school picture from last year, the one that had been displayed on their refrigerator. The only way Tom could have gotten that photo was by being inside their house. Jake's mind raced. When had Tom been inside? They'd never invited him over. They barely spoke beyond neighborly pleasantries. But then Jake remembered, 3 weeks ago, they'd gone to Lisa's mother's house for the weekend. When they'd returned, Jake had noticed their back door was slightly ajar. He'd assumed he'd forgotten to lock it properly. Tom had been inside their house. He'd gone through their belongings, their personal items, their private spaces. He'd probably planted cameras, recording devices, God knows what else. Jake drove home fast, his heart pounding. He needed to search every inch of his house, find whatever Tom had left behind, get his family out of there immediately. But when he pulled into his driveway, Tom was waiting for him. Tom was standing in Jake's front yard, no longer trying to hide or be discreet. He had a camera around his neck and a manila envelope in his hands. "We need to talk," Tom said calmly. Jake got out of his car, every muscle tensed. "Stay away from my family." Tom held up the envelope. "I think you'll want to see this first." Against his better judgment, Jake took the envelope. Inside were photographs he'd never seen before. Pictures of himself, but not taken from Tom's house or yard. These were taken from inside places Jake had been. His office building, the gym, his car. And they weren't recent. The timestamps showed they'd been taken over the past 2 years, long before Tom had moved in next door. "I didn't choose this neighborhood randomly," Tom said quietly. "I chose it because of you. Because you were already part of my collection." Jake stared at the photographs, his mind struggling to process what Tom was telling him. "Someone hired me to watch you, Jake. To document your family. Your routines. Your vulnerabilities. Moving in next door was just the next phase of a very thorough, very expensive project." "Who?" Jake's voice was barely a whisper. Tom smiled. "Someone who knows you very well. Someone who's been planning this for a long time." Jake flipped through more photographs. Pictures of Lisa at work. Pictures of Mia at school. Pictures of their family at restaurants, parks, grocery stores, all taken by someone following them, someone who'd been tracking their every movement for months before Tom had ever appeared. "The client wants to meet," Tom continued. "Tonight. At your house. They'll explain everything then. I'm calling the police." "You could do that," Tom agreed. "But then your client might release the videos." "What videos?" Tom pulled out his phone and showed Jake a video file. The thumbnail showed the inside of Jake's bedroom. Jake could see himself and Lisa, sleeping peacefully in their bed, completely unaware they were being recorded. "Hidden cameras," Tom explained. "Installed 2 years ago, long before I moved in. Motion-activated cloud storage, completely undetectable. Hours and hours of footage. Your entire family's private moments. Everything." Jake felt sick. "What do you want?" "I don't want anything. I'm just the contractor." "But your client?" Tom paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. Your client has some very specific requests. And they've been very patient. But their patience is running out. Who is it? Tom checked his watch. They'll be here at 8 tonight. I'd suggest having your family ready. Ready for what? But Tom was already walking away, back toward his house, leaving Jake standing in his driveway with the envelope full of proof that his family's privacy had been violated in ways he was only beginning to understand. Jake rushed inside and found Lisa and Mia in the kitchen, making lunch, completely oblivious to the danger they were in. We need to leave, Jake said. Right now. Pack some clothes. We're going to a hotel. What's wrong? Lisa looked alarmed. Jake tried to explain, but how could he tell his wife that someone had been watching them for years? That their most intimate moments had been recorded? That someone with enough money to hire professional surveillance had been planning something involving their family? Who would do this to us? Lisa asked after Jake had shown her some of the photographs. Jake had been asking himself the same question. Who had access to that kind of money? Who knew them well enough to hire someone to watch them for years? Who would want to hurt them? And then, as they were packing their suitcases, Jake's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he recognized. A number he hadn't seen in 3 years. His brother David. Jake stared at the phone, pieces of a horrible puzzle clicking into place. David, who'd always been jealous of Jake's success. David, who'd blamed Jake for their father's decision to leave the family business to Jake instead of him. David, who'd disappeared after making threats about getting even. David, who'd inherited their grandfather's trust fund last year. Enough money to hire people like Tom. Jake answered the phone. Hello, brother. David's voice was calm, almost cheerful. I hear you've been having some interesting conversations with your neighbor today. Jake looked out his window. Tom was standing in his yard, phone pressed to his ear, looking directly at Jake's house. What do you want, David? What I've always wanted. What should have been mine. The house, the business, the perfect little family. Dad chose you over me, but that doesn't mean I can't take it all back. You're insane. I'm thorough. Do you know how easy it's been to watch you? To learn everything about your routines, your weaknesses, your fears? Tom's been very helpful, but he's not the only one I've employed. There are people watching Lisa at work. People watching Mia at school. People who could make them disappear any time I give the word. Jake felt the room spinning around him. What do you want me to do? Sign over the business. Sign over the house. Transfer everything to me, and I'll let you and your family walk away. You can start over somewhere else, just like I had to. And if I don't? Then you'll find out what happens when someone with unlimited resources and absolutely nothing left to lose decides to destroy everything you care about. The line went dead. Jake looked at Lisa and Mia, both staring at him with frightened eyes, waiting for him to tell them everything would be okay. But Jake realized he couldn't protect them. David had been planning this for years. He had people everywhere, watching, waiting. Even if they ran, even if they called the police, David had enough money and patience to keep hunting them forever. Jake walked to his window and saw Tom still standing in his yard, still watching. But now Jake noticed something else. A van parked across the street that hadn't been there before. Another car at the end of the block with someone sitting inside. David's people. All around them. All the time. Jake had thought Tom was the threat. But Tom was just one piece of an elaborate, years-long plan that was finally coming to its conclusion. At exactly 8 p.m., someone knocked on Jake's front door. Jake opened it, expecting to see David. Instead, he found a woman he'd never seen before, holding a briefcase and wearing the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. Mr. Harrison, she said politely. My name is Jennifer Walsh. I represent your brother's interests. May I come in? The text arrived at 11:47 p.m. on Memorial Day Sunday, just as Rachel was getting ready for bed. The message was from her sister Amy, who she hadn't spoken to in 8 years. Asterisk. Found something in Mom's basement. You need to see this. Can you come over tomorrow? Asterisk. Rachel stared at the message, her finger hovering over the delete button. Amy lived 3 hours away in their childhood home, the house where their mother had died alone 2 years ago, while Rachel and Amy were still not speaking. The house Amy had inherited because she'd been the one to stay close, to visit regularly, to play the role of the dutiful daughter. But something about the message felt urgent. Desperate even. Rachel typed back, asterisk. What kind of something? Asterisk. The response came immediately, asterisk. Pictures. Videos. Things about us when we were kids. Things that don't make sense. Asterisk. Rachel's stomach twisted. Their mother had been obsessive about documentation, constantly taking photos and videos of her daughters. But after their father left when Rachel was 12, those happy family moments had become increasingly rare. Their mother had grown paranoid, controlling, convinced that someone was always watching, always judging. Asterisk. Can't you just tell me over the phone? Asterisk. Asterisk. No. You have to see them. Please, Rachel. I know we haven't talked, but this is important. This is about both of us. Asterisk. Rachel closed her eyes. She had work the next day, responsibilities, a life she'd built far away from the suffocating atmosphere of her childhood home. But Amy's message had awakened something she tried to bury, a nagging curiosity about their mother's final years, about the secrets that had festered in that house after Rachel had escaped. Asterisk. I'll drive up tomorrow after work. Asterisk. The 3-hour drive gave Rachel too much time to think. She'd left home at 18 and never looked back, cutting contact with her family except for the occasional obligatory holiday call. Amy had stayed, caring for their increasingly unstable mother, bearing the weight of a woman who saw threats everywhere and trusted no one. When Rachel pulled into the driveway of her childhood home, the place looked smaller than she remembered. Paint peeling, yard overgrown, windows dark except for a single light in what used to be their mother's bedroom. Amy met her at the door, and Rachel was shocked by how much her sister had aged. Amy was only 34, 2 years younger than Rachel, but she looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, like someone who hadn't slept properly in years. Thank you for coming, Amy said, her voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure you would. They stood in the entryway for a moment, two sisters who had once shared everything, now strangers bound only by blood and shared trauma. Where are these pictures you mentioned? Rachel asked, wanting to get this over with. Amy led her down to the basement, a space that had always felt forbidden when they were children. Their mother had kept it locked, claiming it was dangerous, full of old wiring and unstable shelving. But now Rachel could see it had been converted into something else entirely. The basement was lined with filing cabinets. Dozens of them. Each drawer was labeled with dates going back 30 years. Against one wall was a desk with multiple monitors, professional-grade camera equipment, and stacks of external hard drives. Mom was recording us, Amy said quietly. Not just taking pictures at birthdays and Christmas. Recording us constantly. In our bedrooms, in the bathroom, everywhere. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. What are you talking about? Amy opened one of the filing cabinets. Inside were thousands of photographs, all meticulously organized by date and labeled with detailed notes. Rachel pulled out a handful at random. They showed her and Amy as children, but these weren't the casual family photos she remembered. These were surveillance shots. Pictures of them sleeping, changing clothes, having private conversations, crying alone in their rooms. Look at the timestamps, Amy said. Rachel examined the photos more closely. Many were taken at night, using infrared photography. Others were clearly shot through windows or from hidden positions. Their mother had been spying on them their entire childhood, documenting their most private moments with the obsession of a stalker. There's more, Amy said, turning on one of the monitors. The screen filled with video footage. Rachel watched herself at age 10, sitting on her bed, writing in a diary she thought was secret. The camera angle suggested it had been hidden in her bookshelf, positioned to capture everything she did in her room. She was watching us constantly. Amy whispered. Every conversation, every private moment, every time we thought we were alone. Rachel's hands were shaking. How long did you know about this? I found it a week ago, when I was finally going through her things. I've been down here every night since, trying to understand. Amy's voice broke. There are terabytes of footage, Rachel. Our entire childhood was her surveillance project. Rachel pulled out more files, finding detailed written observations about their behavior, their moods, their relationships with friends. Their mother had documented everything with clinical precision, as if her own daughters were subjects in some twisted psychological experiment. But then Rachel found something that made her blood freeze. Amy, she said slowly, look at this. It was a folder labeled External Contacts, filled with correspondence. Letters, emails, and invoices addressed to various individuals and organizations. Rachel read through them with growing horror. Their mother hadn't just been recording them for her own obsession. She had been selling the footage. The documents revealed a network of buyers who had specifically requested certain types of content. Private moments of young girls. Intimate family situations. Personal conversations about developing bodies and emerging sexuality. Oh God, Amy whispered, reading over Rachel's shoulder. She was selling videos of us to strangers. To pedophiles. Rachel found invoice after invoice, payments ranging from hundreds to thousands of dollars for specific video content. Buyers requesting footage of bath time, bedtime routines, sleepovers with friends. Their mother had been running a custom surveillance operation, using her own daughters as unwitting subjects. How many people have seen us? Rachel asked, her voice hollow. How many strangers have watched our most private moments? Amy was crying now, but she forced herself to keep searching through the files. There's something else, she said. Something about why she did it. She pulled out a thick folder marked Financial Records. Inside were bank statements showing regular deposits over the course of 15 years. The amounts had started small when Rachel and Amy were very young, but had increased significantly as they entered adolescence. She was broke, Amy said. After Dad left, she had no income. The surveillance. It was how she supported us. How she kept the house. The money from selling videos of us was our grocery money, our school clothes, everything. Rachel stared at the bank statements, realizing the horrible irony. Every meal they'd eaten, every piece of clothing they'd worn, every small comfort of their childhood had been paid for by the violation of their privacy. Their mother had literally sold their innocence to survive. But there was one more revelation waiting in the files. This is just the beginning of the nightmare. What Rachel and Amy discover next will shatter everything they thought they knew about their childhood and reveal a truth more disturbing than they could ever imagine. Amy found the final folder tucked behind the others, labeled simply, Current Operations. Current? Rachel asked. Mom died 2 years ago. Amy opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were recent bank statements, showing deposits continuing right up until the previous month. Someone was still making money from their mother's surveillance system. That's impossible, Rachel said, but even as she spoke, she noticed something else. The camera equipment in the basement looked new, not like something their mother would have purchased years ago. And the hard drives were still warm, suggesting they were currently in use. Amy checked one of the computers. It was logged into a server system that was actively recording. Rachel. Amy's voice was barely audible. The cameras are still running. They found them everywhere. Tiny, nearly invisible devices hidden in light fixtures, smoke detectors, picture frames. The entire house was still under surveillance, and someone was still watching. Who? Rachel whispered. Amy was scrolling through the server interface, looking at file logs and access records. Someone's been downloading footage regularly. Recent footage. From this week. Rachel felt sick. You mean? Everyone who's been in this house since Mom died. The funeral director, the estate lawyer, the utility workers, me living here alone for the past 2 years. Amy's face went white. And now you. They found the buyer database on another computer. Hundreds of names, email addresses, and detailed purchase histories going back decades. But at the top of the list was an account marked Primary Administrator, with access to all current feeds. The account was registered to someone named David Chin, with a local address just 20 minutes away. He's been running Mom's business, Rachel said, the horrible realization sinking in. Someone took over after she died. Amy was already pulling up more files. Look at this, she said, pointing to a series of emails between their mother and David Chin dating back 5 years. The emails revealed that David hadn't just been a customer. He had been their mother's business partner, helping her expand the operation, providing technical expertise and financial backing. He had been the one pushing her to install more cameras, to capture more intimate moments, to expand into live streaming. And according to the most recent emails, David had been planning to take over the entire operation when their mother died, keeping the surveillance running indefinitely. He knows we're here, Rachel said suddenly. Right now. He's watching us discover all of this. Amy looked around the basement with new terror, realizing that their every move, every word, every expression of horror and revulsion was being recorded and potentially broadcast to paying customers who were specifically interested in watching young women's trauma. Rachel's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, *. Having an interesting evening, ladies? Your mother always said you were both very photogenic. *. Amy grabbed Rachel's arm. We have to get out of here. But as they reached the top of the basement stairs, they heard the front door open. Footsteps moved through the house above them, slow and deliberate, like someone who knew exactly where to find them. Hello, Rachel. Hello, Amy. A man's voice called from the living room. I've been looking forward to meeting you in person for so long. Rachel and Amy huddled together at the bottom of the basement stairs, listening to the footsteps move closer. Your mother told me so much about you both, the voice continued. She was very proud of her business, you know. Very proud of the content you helped her create. She always said you'd understand someday, when you were older. When you realized how much she sacrificed to keep you fed and clothed. The footsteps reached the basement door. I've been taking very good care of her legacy. The subscriber base has actually grown significantly since she passed. There's something about the authenticity of her work that modern content just can't replicate. The door handle turned slowly. But I think it's time for the next generation to take over the family business, don't you? Rachel looked at Amy, seeing her own terror reflected in her sister's eyes. They were trapped in a basement they now realized had been designed as a recording studio, with cameras capturing their every moment of fear and desperation. Above them, David Chin stepped onto the first stair, his silhouette blocking the light from the hallway. Don't worry, he said softly. This will all feel very natural. Just like when you were children. Rachel grabbed Amy's hand, realizing that their mother's death hadn't ended their nightmare. It had only passed it on to someone with even fewer boundaries and much bigger plans. The rental listing disappeared from Airbnb exactly 12 minutes after Kevin booked it for Memorial Day weekend. He only noticed because he'd screenshot the confirmation page to send to his girlfriend Claire, and when he tried to share the actual listing, it showed property no longer available. The house had been perfect. A secluded cabin in the Catskills, 3 bedrooms, recently renovated, with glowing reviews about the authentic mountain experience and unforgettable stay. The price had been suspiciously low, $89 per night for a property that should have cost 3 times that, but Kevin had assumed it was a last-minute discount. Now, staring at the error message on his laptop, he felt the first flutter of unease. Claire arrived Friday evening with an overnight bag and a bottle of wine, excited for their first weekend getaway together. They'd only been dating for 2 months, and Kevin was hoping this trip might move their relationship to the next level. She looked beautiful in the fading sunlight, her dark hair catching the breeze as she got out of her car. So where's this amazing cabin you found? She asked, kissing him hello. Kevin pulled up the GPS coordinates from his confirmation email. The location was deeper in the mountains than he'd expected, down a series of increasingly narrow dirt roads that eventually became little more than tire tracks through dense forest. "Are you sure this is right?" Claire asked as Kevin's sedan bounced over another pothole. "It feels like we're driving into the middle of nowhere." "The listing said it was secluded," Kevin replied, though privately he was beginning to wonder if he'd made a mistake. The GPS showed they were still 2 miles from their destination, but they hadn't seen another house, or any sign of civilization, for the past 20 minutes. When they finally reached the cabin, Kevin's concerns evaporated. The place was stunning. A modern log structure nestled in a clearing, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a small lake. Solar panels gleamed on the roof, and a wrap-around deck promised perfect sunrise views. "Okay, you did good," Claire said, squeezing his hand. "This is gorgeous." The key was exactly where the host had said it would be, under a decorative rock near the front door. Inside, the cabin was even more impressive. Hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, a gourmet kitchen with stainless steel appliances. Everything was immaculate, as if it had been staged for a magazine photo shoot. But as Kevin carried their bags upstairs, he noticed something odd. The master bedroom had blackout curtains that were nailed shut. Not hung normally, but actually nailed to the window frame with dozens of small finishing nails. "Weird," he muttered, trying to pull one corner aside to see the lake view. The curtains wouldn't budge. "What's weird?" Claire called from downstairs. "Nothing," Kevin replied, deciding not to ruin the mood over something so trivial. They spent the evening on the deck, drinking wine and talking by candlelight. The isolation that had worried Kevin earlier now felt romantic. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, no distractions, just the two of them and the sound of lapping water. Claire was more relaxed than he'd ever seen her, laughing at his stories, touching his arm when she spoke. When she suggested they go to bed early, Kevin felt a surge of excitement. But in the master bedroom, the nailed curtains bothered him more than he wanted to admit. The room felt claustrophobic, cut off from the outside world in a way that seemed intentional rather than decorative. "Can we sleep in one of the other bedrooms?" he asked Claire. "This one feels stuffy." Claire raised an eyebrow but agreed. They moved to the smaller bedroom down the hall, which had normal curtains that opened to reveal a beautiful view of the moonlit forest. Kevin woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of footsteps on the deck below their window. He lay still, listening. The footsteps were deliberate, pacing back and forth in a regular pattern. Someone was walking around the cabin. Kevin eased out of bed, careful not to wake Claire, and peered through the window. In the moonlight, he could see a figure moving on the deck. Average height, wearing dark clothing, walking slowly from one end of the deck to the other, then turning and walking back. Kevin's first thought was that it might be the property owner, checking on the cabin. But at 3 a.m.? And why not knock or announce themselves? He watched for 10 minutes. The figure never stopped pacing, never looked up at the windows, never seemed to have any purpose beyond the repetitive walk back and forth. Finally, Kevin decided to investigate. He pulled on his clothes and crept downstairs, moving as quietly as possible. Through the living room window, he could still see the figure on the deck still pacing. Kevin opened the front door. The deck was empty. He stepped outside, looking in all directions. The forest was silent except for the gentle sound of wind in the trees. No footsteps, no movement, no sign that anyone had been there. But the deck boards were wet with fresh footprints. Kevin followed the prints to the edge of the deck, where they simply stopped. No trail leading into the forest, no indication of where the person had gone. The footprints just ended, as if whoever had been making them had vanished into thin air. Except Kevin didn't believe in vanishing into thin air. Someone had been on the deck, and that someone had found a way to disappear quickly and quietly when Kevin opened the door. Which meant they were still nearby. Watching. Kevin went back inside and locked the door, his heart racing. He considered waking Claire, but what would he tell her? That he'd seen someone walking on their deck who had somehow disappeared. She'd think he was paranoid or having nightmares. Instead, he sat in the living room chair with a view of the front door and deck, determined to stay alert for the rest of the night. At 4:23 a.m., he heard the footsteps again. This time, they were inside the house. Slow, deliberate steps moving across the floor above him. In the master bedroom. The one with the nailed curtains. Kevin grabbed a poker from the fireplace and crept upstairs. The hallway was dark, but he could see that the master bedroom door, which had been closed when they'd moved their bags out, was now open. He approached slowly, poker raised, and peered inside. The room was empty, but the nailed curtains were moving slightly, as if stirred by a breeze. Kevin stepped closer and realized there was a gap behind the curtains, a space between the fabric and the window that he hadn't noticed before. Someone could hide back there. Someone could have been hiding back there all along. Kevin used the poker to push the curtains aside, revealing not a window, but a hole cut in the wall. A hole large enough for a person to crawl through. Beyond the hole was another room. A room that wasn't part of the cabin's floor plan. This is just the beginning of the nightmare. What Kevin discovers in that hidden room will reveal the true purpose of their perfect getaway, and the reason their rental listing disappeared so quickly. Kevin squeezed through the hole in the wall, using his phone's flashlight to illuminate the hidden space beyond. The room was larger than he'd expected, running the entire width of the cabin. But it wasn't empty. The walls were covered with photographs. Hundreds of them, all showing the same thing: couples staying in the cabin. Kevin moved closer, his light revealing image after image of unsuspecting guests. Couples cooking in the kitchen, relaxing on the deck, sleeping in the bedrooms. The photos had been taken from hidden vantage points throughout the cabin, capturing intimate moments that the subjects never knew were being recorded. At the far end of the room was a desk with multiple monitors, all displaying live feeds from cameras hidden throughout the cabin. Kevin could see himself on one of the screens, standing in the hidden room, looking directly at the camera that was recording him. But the most disturbing discovery was a filing cabinet filled with detailed dossiers on previous guests. Names, addresses, employment information, relationship status, and extensive notes about personal habits and private conversations. Someone had been studying these couples, learning about their lives, documenting their most vulnerable moments. Kevin found his own file labeled Kevin Mitchell and Claire Santos Memorial Day Weekend. Inside were printed copies of their text messages, photos clearly taken with a telephoto lens from outside Claire's apartment, and notes about their relationship timeline, work schedules, and personal backgrounds. The file contained information Kevin had never shared with anyone. Details about his financial situation, his ex-girlfriend, his family relationships. Someone had been researching him for weeks, maybe months, compiling a complete profile before he'd ever seen the rental listing. At the bottom of the file was a handwritten note. Subject shows high stress response to isolation. Girlfriend appears emotionally dependent. Recommended for Phase 2 implementation. Kevin heard Claire calling his name from downstairs. He stuffed the file into his jacket and crawled back through the hole, pushing the curtains back into place. Claire was standing at the bottom of the stairs in her pajamas, looking confused and frightened. "Where were you? I woke up and you were gone. I thought I heard something," Kevin said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Probably just the house settling." But as he spoke, he noticed something that made his blood freeze. Claire's pajamas were different. When they'd gone to bed, she'd been wearing a pink tank top and shorts. Now she was wearing a blue nightgown he'd never seen before. "Claire," he said slowly, "where did you get those pajamas?" She looked down at herself, seeming confused. "These? I don't know. I woke up wearing them." She touched the fabric hesitantly. "I thought maybe I'd packed them and forgotten." "You didn't pack a nightgown. You were wearing the pink tank top." Claire's face went pale. "That's impossible. I remember putting on the tank top, but..." She trailed off, looking genuinely frightened. "Kevin, I don't remember changing clothes. I don't remember anything after we fell asleep." Kevin realized with growing horror that someone had been in their room while they slept. Someone had changed Claire's clothes, and she had no memory of it happening. "We need to leave," he said. "Right now." "What?" Why? Kevin, you're scaring me. Kevin wanted to tell her everything, but the words seemed impossible to explain. How could he tell her that their romantic getaway was actually an elaborate trap? That they were being watched, studied, manipulated by someone who had been planning this for months? Instead, he grabbed their bags and started packing quickly. I just think we should go. Something doesn't feel right about this place. Claire reluctantly helped him pack, but as they were loading the car, Kevin noticed that his keys were missing. He searched his pockets, the cabin, their bags. The keys were nowhere to be found. Did you see where I put my keys? He asked Claire. She shook her head, but Kevin noticed she was moving differently now. Slower, more deliberately, as if she were thinking carefully about each action. Claire, are you okay? I'm fine, she said, but her voice sounded flat, distant. Why don't we just stay the night? We can look for the keys in the morning. Kevin stared at his girlfriend, realizing that something fundamental had changed. The Claire who had been laughing and touching his arm the night before was gone. This Claire was speaking like someone reading from a script. What did they give you? He whispered. What do you mean? But Kevin could see it now, the slight dilation of her pupils, the way she seemed to be moving through water. Claire had been drugged. Probably in her sleep. Probably at the same time someone had changed her clothes. Kevin found his keys 20 minutes later, hanging on a hook inside the kitchen cabinet. A place he would never have put them, in a cabinet he'd never opened. Someone had taken his keys to prevent them from leaving, then returned them when, what? When whatever they had planned was complete. As they drove away from the cabin, Kevin kept checking his rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights following them. But the mountain roads remained dark and empty. Claire fell asleep in the passenger seat, her head lolling against the window. Kevin tried to wake her several times, but she remained unconscious, breathing deeply and evenly. It wasn't until they reached the main highway that Kevin realized the true scope of what had happened. His phone, which had been dead all weekend due to lack of service, suddenly came alive with notifications. Dozens of missed calls. Text messages. Voicemails from numbers he didn't recognize. The first voicemail was from Claire's sister. Claire, where are you? Your boss called me looking for you. You missed work yesterday and today. No one's heard from you since Friday. Kevin checked the date on his phone. It was Wednesday. They had been at the cabin for 5 days, not 2. Somehow, 3 entire days had vanished from their memory. Kevin pulled over at a gas station and tried to piece together what had happened. According to his phone's photo gallery, he had taken dozens of pictures during their stay. Pictures he didn't remember taking, showing activities he didn't remember doing. Photos of Claire cooking elaborate meals in the cabin's kitchen. Photos of them hiking trails he'd never seen. Photos of Claire swimming in the lake, laughing and splashing, looking completely normal and happy. But Kevin didn't remember any of it. The last thing he remembered clearly was finding the hidden room, then waking up Claire to leave. In one of the final photos, Claire was sitting at the cabin's dining table, writing in a journal. Kevin zoomed in on the image and could make out some of the text. Day 4. Kevin is adapting well to the routine. Memory integration proceeding as planned. Subject compliance at 87%. Claire's handwriting. Claire's words. But describing Kevin as if he were a lab rat. Kevin looked at his girlfriend, still unconscious in the passenger seat, and realized he didn't know who she was anymore. Had she been part of this from the beginning? Had their entire relationship been orchestrated to bring him to that cabin? His phone buzzed with a new text message from an unknown number. Thank you for participating in our study. Your data has been invaluable. Claire will recover fully within 24 hours. We trust you'll keep this experience confidential. Kevin stared at the message, then at Claire, then at the photos on his phone showing 5 days of his life that had been stolen from him. He started the car and drove toward the hospital, but he knew that even when Claire woke up, even when the drugs wore off, he would never know the truth. He would never know if the woman he loved had betrayed him, or if she was as much a victim as he was. He would never know what had been done to them during those missing days, or why. And he would never know if it was really over, or if this was just the beginning of something much worse. Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.